On this edition of Lakeville City Limits, I talked to Judy Shumpert about her upcoming retirement from the Downtown Lakeville Business Association and find out about the changes to the organization over the years. Then we head up to Lakeville Liquors to learn about Mississippi distilling and why Rose is so important to that company. Hello, I'm City Administrator Steve Melke. Welcome to City Limits, Lakeville's public information program. Joining me today is Judy Shumpert, Executive Director for the Downtown Lakeville Business Association. Judy, thanks for joining me on City Limits.
Thanks for having me here.
Judy, a couple of reasons to have you on today. We want to learn a little bit more about DLBA, but it's also kind of a sad time because you're going to be leaving the organization for other things that you want to do. So let's talk a little bit about DLBA. Talk about what that organization does.
The Downtown Lakeville Business Association was created back in 1989 by the City Council by an ordinance, and it's a specific geographic area from like County Road 50 to 210th and the side streets besides Holyoke. And within that geographic area, the property owners are assessed a service fee as part of their real estate taxes. And that is the budget for us to help promote our historic downtown. And we use that money for events, various events, some that are for children, some for adults. And the whole idea is to bring them down to see what we have here in downtown Lakeville and support the businesses we have here.
You know, in shopping centers, it's often a portion of their lease to pay for promotional activities for the center that they're in. To a certain extent, that's kind of what DLBA does, doesn't it?
That's exactly what it's doing. It's part of their common area maintenance that they pay, and that is the money then that we use to help support them.
So what are some of the activities that DLBA puts on every year?
Well, we've had all kinds of things throughout the years. We started out, when I started here almost 8 years ago, we had Wednesdays on Main, and we would do it in the little Pioneer Plaza. And we'd have entertainment, and we'd do hot dogs and brats, and we learned after a while that we were expending a lot of money for not any really good results. So we had a very small group of people. So we tossed that aside and decided that we really needed to promote larger events where we can really showcase downtown Lakeville. For an example, Block Bash. We had our first one last August, and thanks to Market Plaza that you have created, that's a place for us to have our events. So we had over 1,000 people that came to Market Plaza, and it was great because there were so many people that had never been downtown before. And that's what we're trying to do, is to see what the services we have. Lots of service businesses. We have wonderful little boutiques, and it's get people here to see what we have.
DLB has been a great partner for the city. The downtown isn't just a commercial area. It's also sort of the cultural center for the city.
Right.
It's where our community celebrations occur. It's where the arts center is. It's where a number of cultural and gathering locations are.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to work with a group like DLBA to promote that area and to hold events that bring people together.
Correct. And I think what's been so key is the partnerships that we have had. For example, the city, and with being able to use Market Plaza, which was built to help us, and that's the place for our farmers market. But we have a wonderful partnership with the school district, with the Arts Center, where we hold our monthly meetings, and the Chamber of Commerce. So all of those partners working together has really helped not only downtown, but the entire community.
Well, Judy, you're going to make a transition too. You're leaving the executive director position, but let's look back a little bit. You came to DLBA about 8 years ago, correct? Mm-hmm. And what brought you to DLBA?
Well, I have this saying, I'd rather wear out than rust out. And I had retired from my previous job and had taken off a year. And then I got really antsy, and it was like, okay, now what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I didn't want to work full-time, but I wanted something to keep me busy besides my volunteer activities. And my daughter, who lives in this area, happened to see it in the paper and said, you need to check this out. So I happened to call Nancy Smith, who was the chair or the president of the association at the time, and she and I had chaired the first B. Robert Lewis golf tournament together. So I called and said, I need something to do. And so I met with she and Paul Hagelin, who's now the president, and the rest is history.
We have great organizational skills, and you kind of glossed over it, but your background also was conducive to the work that you've been doing with DLBA.
Yeah, my background being with the city of Burnsville for 15 years probably had something to do with that. But, you know, and working with committees there and again, working with committees here. And, you know, the one thing I didn't mention is that what has been really a positive impact is our retail committee. You know, they have been doing ladies' nights, and that's something we didn't have before, where you have the retail committee really working together in partnership to really help each other. And they do work together really well, and we need to keep that growing.
Well, I know working with you, you've been a tremendous influence on the organization, have been very good at keeping a lot of people organized and keeping these events on track, and you've worked your tail off.
Well, you know, it's been a wonderful 8 years. I've get all choked up. It's been really great. I'm going to miss a lot of people, but it's time to move on, and we have a new director that's been hired. The board selected Ann Kutzler, who is a Lakeville resident. Her work background is going to be wonderful, and I'm looking forward to the rest of today. We're going to talk about all the good things, and she'll be a positive impact on the organization.
So just looking forward to the future of the organization a little bit, with Ann's leadership now and the board, what sorts of things do you think will be on the horizon for DLBA?
Well, I would see the board continuing some of the activities. Obviously, the Block Bash is a huge thing. I know that the Holiday on Main, which draws families in, will continue. We'll do our holiday lighting, which is another partnership with you, with the city. And I think there will be more work on some redevelopment of the area. We've got a committee that's working on that, and I would think that will work, and then filling up some of our empty spaces. That's needed, and hopefully that's going to happen.
Some of our viewers may not realize that there's going to be some parking lot improvements. Some of the parking lots have come to the end of their useful life, and there's going to be some refurbishment down there this summer, which should really help beautify the downtown.
Yes, and the board of directors and the organization has been very supportive of that. Both the Ben Franklin block, as we call it, which will become a very nice public parking space with nice landscaping and amenities, and then the Arts Center lot, which will be upgraded with removing the chain link fence and more landscaping there. So that's really going to help improvements in downtown.
Well, Judy, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and it's more of a pleasure having worked with you for the last 8 years, and wish you only the best in your personal success, and I'm really looking forward to working with Ann too.
Thank you, and thank you for all your support, and it's been wonderful. It's been a great ride, and it's time to move on.
All right. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Trash walking, cleaning up the roads and byways. Walking, we be trash walking, picking up thrown away refuse. Walking, we be trash walking, helping Mama Nature look clean. Walking, we be trash walking. If I can do it, you can too.
Do some trash walking by recycling for your community and yourself.
Did you know that the St. Paul Farmers Market is held 2 days a week in Lakeville? Come to downtown Lakeville to get fresh local products. From vegetables to honey, flowers to eggs, you can find it at the Farmers Market. Dates and times will be Wednesdays at Market Plaza from noon till 5 p.m. and on Saturday mornings from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Lakeville Area Arts Center. For more information on the St. Paul Farmers Market, visit the city's website. We remind residents that odd-even watering conservation regulations are in effect. In addition to the odd-even watering schedule, watering is not allowed between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. on any day. Fines will be imposed for non-compliance with the watering restrictions.
Hi there, and welcome back to Cellar Notes. I'm here today with Ryan Burchett. Nice to meet you, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Ryan is the co-founder, co-owner, and master distiller at Mississippi River Distilling Company. So, Ryan, you've been on TV before, right?
Once or twice, yeah.
Yeah?
My previous life, before I went to make booze for a living, I was a TV meteorologist for about 15 years. My brother used to design highways for a living, and now we make booze. So my mother's so proud.
Oh, I can imagine. What made you decide to get into distilling?
You know, really, it was a change in the laws in Iowa. We're in a small town called Lakeville, Iowa, outside the Quad Cities. Usually the only reason anyone's heard of Lakeville is because of the American Pickers.
Of course.
They're about 3 blocks from our distillery, and that's where they shoot that show. So that brings a little attention to our little community, too. It used to be illegal to taste or buy spirits at a distillery in Iowa. And they opened it up, hoping to garner some tourism and things like that. We were the first ones to open up after that law changed about 3 years ago, and have been going strong since. And you're seeing something similar here in Minnesota, as the laws have recently been relaxed a little bit for micro distillers to get into the game, and now they're starting to pop up. And this world of craft distilling is really starting to come on more mainstream across the entire country.
Absolutely, outstanding. Well, let me ask you a little bit about somebody named Rose. Can you tell me a little bit about her?
Rose is our still, and we got our still. It was custom made for us in Germany by a company called Cody Distilling Technologies, and we went to Germany, we trained over there, and the still, well, it has some curves. It's a beautiful piece of handcrafted, it's artwork to me. The way the copper is handcrafted, and it's got this big, we call it a Willy Wonka looking pear-shaped hat, but it had so many curves we had to give it a lady's name, and we called her Rose. Partly because our gin is called River Rose, and we just like the name. But it's a really unique still. It's a hybrid still. We have a traditional whiskey pot still, and about 300 gallons. And that we can run by itself. And then off to the side, we have 2 columns. Each one has 8 distillation plates in it. And those columns give us the flexibility to do about anything we want to in our still. We can just distill whiskey off the pot still, or we can go through the columns, all 16 plates, and get all the way to 190 proof, which is the legal minimum. When you're distilling vodka, you have to get a neutral spirit, you have to distill it all the way to 190 proof. So, and we can turn those plates on and off and be somewhere in the middle if we want to too. So as a craft distiller, it gives us tremendous flexibility to make about anything we set our minds to. So it's been probably clearly our most important tool. But it's really important to have quality equipment to make quality spirits.
Absolutely. You kind of beat me to my next question, was whether they're a column or is it a pot still? And
Yeah.
It's a little bit of both.
It is.
And the whole distillery is kind of built around this still, isn't it?
We did. It's so pretty, and that we built the building with the windows are configured so that you can see it from the street, you can see it from the river. Our distillery sits right on the Mississippi River, and in our tasting room, there's a giant window in the back of the bar that looks into the still. So about anywhere you are in the place, you can look back and see the still.
All right, let's get into a little bit about your products that you brought here today. You said you distill everything from vodka, gin, artisan spirits, whiskeys, all sorts of stuff. Why don't we start with the clear spirits? Let's go with vodka. Tell us about your vodka.
Absolutely. First of all, the most important thing about our stuff is it's all created from local grain, sourced right from the farmers who grow it, and it's all from within 25 miles of our building. So we go out to the farm, we get the grain in the raw, we bring it back, and we do everything from the raw grain to the final bottling right at our distillery. There's no sourced whiskeys, no shortcuts in between. We felt like it was very important that if we were going to gear our distillery towards tourism, that we show people the authentic process from beginning to end, and everything is built around that. The vodka, River Pilot vodka, is made from 100% Iowa corn. It's farmers about 2 miles west of our distillery, right in LeClaire, that we get our corn from. And it's yellow number 2 dent field corn, what most farmers around these parts grow.
Sure.
Corn is a great grain for distilling because it's packed full of starch. We take starch, make it into sugar. Yeast eats sugar, makes it into alcohol, and we get a lot of alcohol that way. So that's why corn is frequently used in American spirits, because you get a really good yield with it. The vodka is distilled through all 16 plates of our columns. Then we run it through charcoal filters for a full day and redistill the whole batch. So we just get a crystal clean, smooth, top shelf vodka. It retains just a kiss of sweetness from the corn, but really just a really nice, mellow, smooth vodka.
Double distilled and filtered.
That's right. Yep.
Outstanding. And so what's the difference between that and your artisan spirit?
It's a common question for sure, but the River Baron Artisan Spirit, a lot of small distilleries will come out with a white whiskey, an unaged whiskey, This is kind of our answer to that. The problem is a lot of those whiskeys go into the barrel for a reason, to take the harsher edges off of them and things like that. This particular product, I tell people to think of it like a flavored vodka. We can't legally call it that because no flavor's added, but because the flavors are natural, but it's clean and smooth enough that it works that way. And what it is, it's 80% corn and 20% wheat. We distill it to vodka proof, but we distill it once and then we stop. We don't do that charcoal filtration and multiple distillation, so that full flavor stays in there. And it has kind of a vanilla butterscotch flavor that comes from the corn and wheat. And what I always tell folks is the vodka, if I'm having a martini or I'm having a vodka tonic, I want that really nice neutral spirit. But if you're mixing it with anything, vodka just is disappearing in the background. This spirit gives you something that you have a flavor you can complement. And it's just as smooth, but those flavors are there, and it really works well with about anything sweet or citrus. We use them in rum drinks, we use it in tequila drinks. We have a Mexican restaurant just a couple doors down from our distillery that makes margaritas with it. So it's fun to watch what people do with it when you pull a traditional label off of a product like that, and they're just kind of left to not just go to the cocktail book and say, I'm going to make this, this, and this, just whatever they think tastes good. And we have tons of recipes on our website for it because so many people have experimented with it. It's been a lot of fun.
Sure, the versatility of that kind of a spirit's got to be fun to work with.
Absolutely,
All
absolutely.
sorts of mixologists have got to be coming up with all sorts of crazy stuff to make
Exactly, exactly.
So the gin, the next step up, our botanical spirit.
Right, so the gin is a 12 botanical mixture, and we went for more of an American style gin. You're seeing more of this, where the juniper is a little bit backed off, heavier on some of the other botanicals, and ours is really rich in citrus and floral. It has lemon, orange, and grapefruit peel. It has rose petal, lavender, cucumber, and I get a lot of folks who say, I don't usually do gin because I don't like it to taste like the Christmas tree was shoved up my nose, but this gin is really nice, and it's just perfectly suited for gin and tonics because of all the citrus and stuff in it. It's really nice spring and summertime gin. But the other thing that's really cool about it is you can mix a lot of things that you might not normally set out to do with a gin, just because that juniper is not so overpowering. And so we've done mojitos with it, where all of a sudden the juniper is gone. When you put a little bit of that lime in there and some mint, the citrus comes pouring out of it. We love to make Bloody Marys with it because it brings out some of the citrus and celery notes and things like that in a Bloody Mary. There's in the fall, there's cinnamon in our botanical mixture, and we mix it with fresh apple cider. It's fantastic. So there's all kinds of fun things that you can do with this gin that you might not otherwise think to. And we just found out last week, we had sent it off to the San Francisco International Spirits Competition, and it came back with a gold medal. So we're really excited about that,
Nice.
to get a little national recognition for the gin. So yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So the whiskeys are Cody Road whiskeys. There's a Cody Road Bourbon and a Cody Road Rye. Before we
Right.
get into that, I saw something interesting that just kind of threw up a little red flag. I was like, Cody Road, where do I know that from? Looked up a little bit, and it turns out it's named after William Cody, Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, he was born about a mile from our distillery and lived in LeClaire till he was about 6 years old. So we figured he was a famous enough whiskey drinker, we ought to try to capitalize on that somehow.
Good call, I think.
Yeah. So our distillery sits on Cody Road, and certainly we couldn't trademark anything having to do with William F. Cody, but we thought it was kind of a cool name, and his road started in LeClaire. Our distillery sits on Cody Road, and so that's where the name came from. And the bottles have a picture of downtown LeClaire from the late 1800s, so about the time he would have been there. And just trying to, all of our products, we're trying to tie into some of the rich history of the river and our small community to have a story to tell along with the products. And so that's where the whole Cody Road thing came. And Buffalo Bill's head is on the top of the closures on each bottle and that kind of stuff. So.
Excellent. Let's get into the bourbon. A lot of people think bourbon, you can only make it in Kentucky. Well, there are a number of different rules and regulations and laws that you have to abide by, but obviously being Kentucky isn't one of them because this bourbon is from Iowa.
Right, and I get a lot of folks who come on the distillery tours who say, it doesn't have to be made in Bourbon County, Kentucky, and ironically, there's not a single drop of commercially available bourbon that comes from Bourbon County, Kentucky. Most of the distilleries south of Louisville and central portions of Kentucky. But the rules and regulations are, and this is set by the federal government, the Alcohol, Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. It has to be made in America. You know, Scotch can only be made in Scotland, Irish whiskey in Ireland, bourbon whiskey only in America. So you can make it anywhere in the 50 states.
Sure.
Secondly, it has to be made of at least 51% corn. And most bourbon has to be about 70 to 80, or doesn't have to be, but is 70 to 80% corn. And we've got enough corn around us. We figured we ought to be making some more bourbon in Iowa to start with. But,
Shouldn't be too tough in Iowa,
Right, exactly. And then it has to be distilled at less than 160 proof, aged at less than 125 proof in a new charred North American white oak barrel. So we use the barrels once, can't use them again for bourbon. It always has to be a newly charred barrel. So what that does is gives American whiskey a really distinct oak profile, a very oak forward, heavy vanillas, heavy caramels. And then most of those barrels at the big distilleries, we don't do this with ours obviously because we're not big enough, but they're shipped overseas. They have contracts with distilleries in Scotland and Ireland, and a lot of them are used for Irish whiskey aging or for Scotch whiskey aging, or sent to the Caribbean to age rum in. But after some of those more intense tannins and some of the intensity of the char has been soaked out of there, and that's why you'll a lot of times see Scotches that might be aged 10, 12, 20 years because that oak is going to be slower to interact with those spirits. So it's a real distinct difference between American whiskeys and whiskeys from overseas because of some of those barreling rules. But long story short, on ours we use a smaller barrel, a 30-gallon barrel that actually comes to us from a cooperage in Avon, Minnesota. It's called the Barrel Mill. What we're doing by using a smaller barrel, it's about half the size of what you'd see in Kentucky or Tennessee, we're giving the whiskey more wood to interact with, so it's going to grab those oak flavors a little faster for us. And so our bourbon is 70% corn, 20% wheat, and 10% unmalted barley because we use local grain. We can't get malt locally, so we use an unmalted barley. It goes into those barrels, and right now our whiskeys are aging for about 18 months in those barrels. The other thing that we do that's a little bit different for our small batch stuff is most American whiskeys are barreled at the legal maximum, which is 125 proof. And what that does is it minimizes how much room it takes to age the same amount of whiskey. If you age at a lower proof, if you add more water before you put it in the barrel, well then it takes more barrels. What we do is we age our whiskey about 5% alcohol or 10 proof above what we're shooting for our bottling. And you always lose some alcohol during aging to evaporation, soaking into the wood, those kind of things. But what we're doing, we're laying it down at a lower proof so that almost everything that's going into your bottle is interacting with oak. We're not adding a bunch of water on the back end. Sometimes you can be looking as much as 20 to 30% new water added after aging, depending on how it comes out of the barrel and what the final proofing is on a bottle. So our stuff is coming out, and we're getting the full color from that. We're not adding any coloring to it. We don't chill filter it. If you stick one of our whiskeys in the freezer, you'll start to see some of the what we call fleck, some of the proteins and oils start to kind of ribbon in there. It's not a problem. That's a good thing. It means you're getting the full flavor of the whiskeys. And the bourbon in particular is really interesting in the way that it finishes. That unmalted barley, because it's not roasted, gives kind of a grassy, nutty nose and finish. It's going to be different than a Kentucky bourbon, and that's by design. That bottle we proof at 90 proof, so it'll stand up to a couple ice cubes, no problem. Cocktails really well. It's definitely going to be a little bit different than what you're accustomed to from some of the mass-produced bourbons, and that's by design. We're a small distillery. We have to have kind of a niche. I'll put the smoothness of our whiskeys up against anybody, but our flavors, we purposely try to give them a little bit different slant so we can stand out from the crowd.
Sure. And in addition to your bourbon, you also make a rye whiskey. I would imagine rye is pretty plentiful down there as well.
Actually, it's not. I was very surprised to be able to find it. One of our volunteers who helps us bottle, we have people come in from all around and help us bottle a couple times a month. And one of our guys, he sells crop insurance. And he said to us, he's like, I have a guy who's growing rye about 20 miles straight upriver from you. And I was like, oh my gosh, because it's mostly corn and soybeans in our neck of the woods. We have found a guy that grows wheat and barley for us, but we hadn't found anybody with rye. And these guys are doing a ton of rye. They have a bunch of sandy bottom, river bottom ground, and we hooked up with them, and now we're using about 1,000 bushels of rye a year, which is roughly a semi-truckload of their stuff, so it's great. And this particular whiskey, Cody Road Rye, is 100% rye. And that's not typical either. Most rye whiskeys are going to be, legally to be called rye whiskey, it has to be 51% rye. And a lot of times it'll be 52 to 60% rye, and the rest is a lot of times filled with corn.
Sure.
Rye is a really bold, spicy grain. You think about it in baking, like wheat bread versus rye bread. Wheat, sweet, fruit, and light. And in distilling, it's got kind of a fruity sweetness to it. Rye, by its nature, is just a really bold grain. And so for distilling, it's got a real spiciness to it, a peppery kind of nose and finish. And so a lot of rye people are, I don't do rye whiskey because it's kind of a, it's a big whiskey to chew on sometimes.
There's kind of stigma around it too.
Exactly.
It's got a particular flavor that.
Exactly. And this one, we distill it. We run a ton of water through the still, through the cooling towers when we're distilling it. And what that does is it creates a lot of reflux, meaning as the alcohol vapors are coming up, they're condensing back down into the still over and over. And so we get a really clean whiskey this way. And the peppery spiciness of rye is present in this whiskey, but there's also some fruit sweetness to it, a little mintiness that's different than most of the ryes that you'll find out there, only because a lot of times it's masked by the spiciness or the heavier oak character of those. So back before Prohibition, rye was the predominant spirit in this country. And then during and after Prohibition, the corn whiskeys, your Tennessee whiskeys, your bourbons and stuff really took over in the marketplace. But if you go back, most of the classic cocktails were designed around a rye base. So your Manhattans, Sazeracs, Old Fashions, things like that work fantastically with this rye because it is lighter, it has some sweetness, and there's plenty of room for some bitters or some sweet if you want a cocktail with it. And it's like asking me which one of my kids I love the most, but this is probably my favorite spirit that we make. It's just really, it's sippable, it's approachable for people who haven't gotten into rye before, and it just cocktails so well.
And in addition to those whiskeys, you guys also make a whole bunch of other experimental whiskeys, don't you? I mean, I've read stuff about like a strawberry and a honey and a smoked whiskey and all that kind of stuff. What are you doing over there?
Well, so once we established our line of our 5 main spirits, we wanted to still do some creative things, and that's where we came up with our concept of our seasonal whiskeys. We do 2 different programs. One is our regular seasonal program where we do 4 different spirits throughout the year. We always try to find some local ingredient that we're not otherwise using to incorporate into those spirits. We do limited bottlings, usually 3,000 to 5,000 bottles in these tall 375 milliliter bottles. So it's a pint, a little smaller bottle. And when they're gone, they're gone. They kind of run their course. And then we have what we call the Still Crazy series, which are packaged in those same bottles, but those are even a little farther out there where we start to do some really weird things. So the seasonals, right now we just bottled last week our Queen Bee Honey Whiskey, which is probably our most popular seasonal. We use our Cody Road bourbon, infuse it with real honey from a beekeeper about 20 miles up the road from us, and it's just a really nice natural sweetness, and it's great for this time of year with a little lemonade or something like that, or just to sip on the rocks. We've done a coffee liqueur. We've done strawberry vodka with a local berry patch where we basically make it like gin, put vodka in the still that's already distilled, load it up with fresh strawberries and redistill it so you get the essence of strawberries but not the syrupy sweetness that you get from a lot of flavored vodkas on the market.
It's not an infusion, it's just a process of the distilling.
Exactly, so it's huge nose, it's a huge on the aftertaste of strawberries, but it's still a vodka, so you have to add, there's no sweetness to it, so you have to add something sweet to it, which is always interesting. This year, if the crop comes around after the rotten winter we had, we're hoping to do a peach liqueur with some peaches coming from southern Illinois and some things like that. So there's always cool things going on with the seasonals. The Still Crazy series is a little farther out there. We did a rye whiskey infused with bananas. We called it Mono Loco, which means crazy monkey in Spanish.
A banana whiskey?
Yeah, we did the smoke whiskey, which was, we added a cherry wood smoked barley to the rye whiskey, and that gave it a different finish. We're doing a barrel-aged gin this summer. And so we're always looking for some little funnier or weirder things that we can do in the distillery that probably aren't for everybody. I mean, banana whiskey is not for everybody.
Absolutely.
And so we only make usually about 800 to 1,000 bottles of those. But they're for the people that are looking for something a little more adventurous. And it's so much fun for us as distillers to kind of venture down a road into something completely different.
I can imagine. So in the future, is there anything you're excited to work with? I mean, other than the peaches you told me about.
Yeah.
Anything else in your head that you want to, like, people are distilling stuff with all sorts of crazy botanicals and whatnot now. You
Yeah.
take like rose flavored whiskeys
Right,
and
right.
elder flowers and all that kind of stuff.
You know, for us, the way it usually works out is we identify an ingredient that we can source locally, and then we go from there and try to figure out what we can do with it. So we keep in touch with the guys in Germany that we trained with. We'll send them an email and say, hey, look, I've got honey. What can I do with that? And they'll give us some ideas. And I usually say, well, that sounds easiest, so I'll try that and start there. But we just found out right across the river from us that there's a young couple who has been tapping maple trees for the last 3 years and thinks they finally have things up and going enough that the next year they're going to open a sugar shack and bring the public in and stuff like that. So we're talking about trying to do a maple infuse, which is not so far off the beaten path. But the interesting thing is that maple syrup that you're accustomed to in the Aunt Jemima bottles is not what natural maple syrup tastes like. It's a different flavor, a different sweetness, and we think could make a really cool maple infused bourbon. So we're talking with them, and you know, it's just a matter of what comes our way. This winter, we've done a coffee liqueur for the last 3 years for our winter seasonal with a local coffee roaster. This year we're going to make that into a cream liqueur, so it'll be a coffee cream just to try to shake it up a little bit.
Sure.
And so, we never quite know exactly where it's taken us. We usually work about 6 months in advance and are always trying to find what the next fun flavor is going to be.
Yeah, that's where we find the best innovation comes through, is when people just goofing around, just
Exactly.
messing around with what they got.
And that's what's so cool about craft. And it's not just us, it's happening all over this country, and it's certainly happening in Minnesota now. You're starting to see more of these distilleries pop up, and we're small enough, we're nimble enough that we can try a product like a banana whiskey and only make a few hundred bottles of it and put it out there and see what happens. And it's really the spirit of craft that you've seen come up through the ranks of craft beer now being translated into spirits. And I think as more and more people's eyes are open to this kind of innovation that's happening on a local level, where you can really know where your stuff's coming from and who's making it, you know, I don't view other craft distillers as my competition. We're just trying to shave a little market bit out from the big guys, and there's so much to be had for everybody.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, and
Very nice to
thanks
meet
so
you.
much, and we'll hope to see folks around Minnesota here before long.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us here on Cellar Notes. We'll see you next time.
Now it's time for the answer to today's trivia question, which is, how many fields get striped every week in the Parks and Recreation system? If you guessed D, 88 fields, you would be correct. Crews are constantly maintaining our fields, making them available throughout the playing season. Fields include soccer, baseball, lacrosse, and softball that all get striped once a week and also get mowed either once or sometimes even twice a week. More information about the Parks and Recreation Department can be found at the city's website. Here's a look at some of the upcoming public meetings that you can attend at City Hall. The City Council will be meeting on Monday, June 16th at 7 p.m. The Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources Committee will be meeting on Wednesday, June 18th at 6 p.m. The Planning Commission will hold its meeting on Thursday, June 19th at 6 p.m. And the Economic Development Commission will be meeting on Tuesday, June 24th at 4:30 p.m. For more information on government meetings and the role of our boards and commissions, visit the city website at www.lakevillemn.gov. That's it for this edition of Lakeville City Limits. Thanks for watching. We would like to take a second to bid farewell to someone who has contributed to our City Limits program. Economic Development Specialist Adam Kienberger has taken you out and about Lakeville, highlighting local businesses and updating us on development in Lakeville for the past 8 years. Adam is leaving us, and we wish him good luck in his future endeavors. If you experience a problem with your cable TV service here in Lakeville, you should first contact Charter Communications at 1-800-581-0081. If you do not receive a satisfactory response, you can call the city at 985-4407, and we will assist you in resolving your problem. And just a reminder, you can see all of our programming online on the city website at www.lakevillemn.gov. Thanks again for watching this program and all of our programming here on LG TV.